Welcome to the Yoga Voice, a podcast by City Yoga, School of Yoga and Health. Our guests discuss how the contemporary practice of this ancient art transforms the lives of individuals and communities in the Midwest and beyond. City Yoga has been a center for the practice of yoga and yoga teacher training since opening in 2002. Join us as we explore how yoga inspires and transforms.
Welcome to the Yoga Voice. Dave Sims here once again, and thank you all for tuning in. Today, my conversation was really just a joyful time spent talking to this amazing yoga teacher. She's also a studio owner, mother of two boys. She's a self-proclaimed local food catalyst. So it's about being an activist and beyond. Natasha Walters coming to us from Logansport, Indiana. It's in northern Indiana. And it was so nice to speak with her. And she's just a wonderful soul that's had this incredible yoga journey and life journey that's led her from small town Indiana up to Chicago and career in Denver, Colorado, and back to Chicago and finally back. And I should add, she's traveled around the world to many exotic places and learned from many amazing people. And then she ended up back here in Indiana, in Logansport, back to her roots, so to speak. And she has just had this journey of seeking knowledge and sharing this passion for yoga and healthy living and healthy communities, not just being a studio owner, but really a leader in her community, a community leader in the aspect of talking about coming together as a community from different walks of life, doing work that is, helping youth and helping farmers, and this demonstration of sustainability at all levels in a community, and looking at the local food movement in particular of how it can benefit the farmers and communities, and rethinking the way things have been done in recent years, recent decades around our food chain, and how we just how we look at our some of our habits, whether it's food, whether it's toxicity in our own bodies or in our neighborhoods or in our community, and how we can move forward, and how yoga teaches us that it's about really becoming just a good human being. We're all, and my belief is that we're all spiritual beings trying to navigate this human existence. And, I felt like that's sort of what was shining out from our conversation today with Natasha. She is evolving into this wonderful human being, trying to create a ripple effect with the teachings and with the work she's doing in the world. And she's having a big impact. She's making a big splash in a little town in northern Indiana. So do enjoy a listen, and we welcome your feedback and suggestions on other interviews you'd like us to have. And so sit back, relax, and enjoy my little chat with Natasha. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Yoga Voice. And this morning, I have a wonderful treat from northern Indiana, Logansport, and this is Natasha Walters. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Great to be here with you.
Yes, and thank you so much for taking the time out to to speak with me and, provide this conversation for our listeners. And we, we try to spread the message of the transformative powers of yoga and, related practices to individuals and communities. And we do this through talking with teachers and studio owners like yourself from Indiana, from the Midwest, and from really all over the world. And so welcome to our little online podcast community.
Thank you.
And as a nice way to get started, I usually like to ask our guest, what is inspiring you about yoga today? So it could be yourself or in general.
Yeah. Well, we're in interesting times right now, and the conversation that we're really having in our community right now is how our yoga has led us up to this moment and prepared us to be in this moment with the sense of steadiness and ease within uncertainty, and how time on the mat is more important than ever now. And then the opportunity to take it off the mat for some people is really there in terms of just being able to practice because there's more space in their life. And for others, going out into the world is very different and uncertain and sometimes scary. And so taking the yoga into that environment as well, it's the time for it.
Yeah. Very well said. And I've been feeling that a lot here in Indy, where it's like being able to, I've had the same conversation with some of our teachers about, like our practice has really got us prepared for this, and feeling a sense of gratitude for the practice. Like, oh, thank God I have this coping tool, if you will, for going through this whole challenge that we're in right now. So tell me a little, tell our listeners about your yoga journey. How did you come to yoga, and kind of a little bit of what your life and what you were like before yoga, and then what transpired and how that's evolved to where you're at today.
Sure. Yeah, we'll go down that wonderful journey. Yeah. It started for me between 15 and 20 years ago. And I lived in Chicago when I took my first yoga class. It was like a Bali Total Fitness or something. I was always a fan of group exercise. I was an athlete in high school and in college, did some clubs, but I always liked to go to group classes. I like that sort of energy. And I tried a yoga class, and it was very interesting. It was very different. And I remember I took a handful of those, and I remember I didn't know what it was, but it was Shavasana. And it was a very different experience, doing Shavasana in the gym. And I was like, well, this is kind of cool. And I was interested in the way that the instructor was using an eloquent language that I hadn't really heard before. And so fast forward a couple of years, and I had moved to Denver. I worked for Urban Outfitters and visual merchandising, and did a lot of traveling, and they moved me to Colorado. And I was driving by a studio that had a big sign out front, a week of free hot yoga. And eventually I made my way in there, and I took my first class. It was a Bikram studio at the time, and I took that first class. And I remember gazing at myself in the mirror, and the instructor was standing at the back of the room, and she was giving me those great instructions on how to move my body, and she wasn't doing the movements. And so again, it was another different experience that was really lovely and really centering, to be able to hear instructions and formulate them without seeing it. And it clicked then. And I went back over and over and really started to feel, when I walked out of class, a difference in my body, and started to feel the energy, the vibration, how I was really a different being after than before. And so I fell into a vinyasa class a couple months after that, and in that class, I was used to the steady pace and repetition of Bikram, and all of a sudden the teacher's going, inhale, do this, exhale, do that, inhale, do this, and I was like, whoa, what is going on here? But I also had a gymnastics background and dance, and I loved dance, so that hit another really lovely chord for me of just feeling the feeling of moving in unison with others that the vinyasa flow brings. And so that was beautiful. And then my teacher, Dave, that studio actually became Core Power Yoga. It was it was maybe the second or third Core Power studio in Denver. It was very early when they were just getting started. And my teacher, Dave Porter, said, hey, have you ever thought about teacher training before? Great question. And I thought, wow, he must think I'm good at yoga. I didn't know I was like nailing this thing. Maybe I will think about it. And then I said, my grandmother had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I had put in a request to move back to Indiana because I was very close to her. And I said, Dave, it's just really not, I'm intrigued by this, but it's just really not a good time. And he said, there'll never be a good time. And I took that home and processed that. And I knew it would take a bit of time for me to get the transfer back. And so I decided to go ahead with the training. And the training was 3 months, and it took 3 months for me to get transferred back. And so I went into that training, and I didn't have any, at that time, I didn't have any understanding of the philosophy. I just knew the asana. And that very first night in teacher training, my mind was blown because they started talking about the yamas and niyamas. And I just wrote about this yesterday, actually. I again said, the things that are being presented here are like the course on how to be a good human that I never got in life. And suddenly my mind was blown again, and it just opened up from there. And so I finished that training. It was, what yoga teacher training does for us is just expands the whole world in such an amazing way, and moved back to Chicago. And yoga hadn't really at that point taken off in Chicago yet, and Core Power was not there. And I decided I needed more training, and also wanted to get, start to get into community there. And took another 200-hour training at Yoga View there. And it was lovely in a very different way. 30 minutes of meditation every day, and Ashtanga based, and just wonderful. And so that's kind of the entry point. And it changed everything for me. And after that, by the end of that second training, I had decided, I had a moment at Urban Outfitters. I loved that job. It was creative, and I traveled so much and worked with amazing people all over the country. But I found myself one day, I was in Evanston. I love Evanston. It's like a great town. And we were creating this amazing display. And I found, like what I'm pouring my energy into, actually, it was to get people to buy more jeans, that project essentially, and I was like, this isn't really like in alignment with these values that I'm identifying with myself, of simplicity, of not taking more than what we need. And the principles that were coming up for me weren't in alignment. And so I started the process of saying, okay, what's next for me? And I really had no idea. I just started that process with Urban, and it took about 6 months for me to get my position filled and get to where I felt like I could go. And what I had planned on doing was going over to India. This was like right before Eat, Pray, Love, the book was released. Uh-huh. And I was kind of in that state of wanting to go over there. And I knew that there was something in my lens of seeing the world that I wasn't seeing, and I wanted to completely immerse myself in something that was unfamiliar to me. And India felt like that place for me. And I can share, I finally made it there. I didn't make it at that point in time. Uh-huh. I asked, the universe or spirit for that experience, and what came instead was children.
A surprise.
So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. So life took a different turn, and I became a mother of 2 great boys who are now 10 and 11 years old. And and was led to the path to open the yoga studio in Logansport.
Yeah, that is so sweet. And you said you did make it. You made it to India at some point, or is that still on the radar?
I made it to India 2017. So it's been 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm.
How was that experience for you?
It was lovely. I went on retreat with Govindas from Bhakti Yogashala in Santa Monica. Uh-huh. And he led just a wonderful trip in Rishikesh, and Ooh. It was amazing. And I knew when the moment arrived of the reason that I was being called to be there. I knew that specific moment, and it was at Ramana's Garden Children's Home. Are you familiar with that organization? Yeah, so Ramana's Garden was started by a woman, Devi Dwaba.
Okay.
And it's a children's home, and sometimes we would call it an orphanage, but it's not that at all. It's I arrived at Ramana's Garden, and I didn't know the history. I didn't know what I was walking into. But as we arrived to visit, Govindas was singing kirtan there that night for all of the children, and it was open benefit for Rishikesh and for the organization. And as we're walking in, to my left, the entire way that we're walking in are all organic gardens. And so much beautiful food growing. And we come into the space, and all of the structures were built out of clay, kind of adobe-like plastic bags. It's all solar powered, and very humble, but also just, in India, everything is so ancient and it feels so holy and amazing. And so I'm walking through the space, and it's all hitting me. And then Dwaba comes to greet us, and she's just this beautiful woman, and she holds this presence. And as soon as I came into contact with her, it was like immediate tears. I was just so moved by her presence. And so they took us in, and they run an organic cafe there. So they grow all of the food, and then that's part of how they make their funds to run the space. And so they fed us a beautiful meal, and it had like a fresh green salad, which I was so grateful to have, because I like fresh, raw things. And in India, there's a lot of, like
Oh, yeah.
dal and lentils and like that sort of thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like raw vegetables. And they made like a vegan lasagna. So it was like lovely comfort food, but also so healthy and amazing. And the children are involved with serving and making. And the whole time that I was in this cafe, my tears were they wouldn't stop, because I was sitting in the embodiment of all of the things that I envisioned creating,
Mm-hmm.
that I have envisioned creating over the years. And it was there for me to see and experience. And so I requested some time with Dwaba bravely. It was like, when you get in the presence of someone like that, they feel almost like a superstar, And I was like,
Yeah.
I need to just be able to talk to this woman before I leave here. And I said, how did you do this? I'm so moved by this. And it just really ignites the fire of what I've been feeling and desiring and wishing for in our culture is really mindful living and nourishing ourselves and connecting. And, as we walked through the schools, the kids are singing and they're hugging and they're laughing and they just were happy. And what Dwaba was doing, she's bringing kids off the street, working with India's poorest who, we just can't even imagine what they have been through.
Mm-hmm.
And then creating this place of just complete love. And I asked her that question, how did you do this? And she said, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And she just touched her heart and said, it's just love. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. It's just love. And so, I asked to be able to call on her, and that's one of our services with the community is we work closely and learn from them. And also that's a way that we can share and give back. Right now, we're very fortunate that a lot of our members at the studio have stuck with us, and we're online and donations, and we're taking our donations over there. Mm-hmm. And they're good. They're solid. And then they have people lining up at the gates needing food because, in India, people don't have a week's worth. A lot of people don't have a week's worth of income. They have a day's worth, and that's it. And, that shut down. So they're feeding people and just doing such amazing work. And it's been so great because I didn't ever get to learn from Dwaba aside from being there in her presence. And now that this has happened in our world, we've all taken everything online. And so now she's started, like many of us, fumbled through figuring out how to do Zoom and how to do these electronic things. And so I've been able to learn from her through these people connecting and doing podcasts with her, just like we're doing. And so it's been great to be able to be connected in that way.
Oh, what a wonderful story and a wonderful connection. And I'll put that information in the podcast notes. And it's do they have a website kind of thing?
Yeah, it's ramanasgarden.org. Or maybe, I think it's actually ramanas.org.
Okay. I'll find that and get that for our listeners. What a beautiful, sounds like a beautiful place. I've heard so many amazing things about Rishikesh, and India's on my vision board, and I had a friend ask me if I wanted to go, as a travel buddy this year, and just the timing wasn't right, and then this happened, and I think it was scheduled for June. So I'm like, so that trip went away anyway. But when you talk about, first of all, you kind of left off in Chicago and now you're in Logansport. How is this? the hometown that you returned to, or how did that journey transpire?
Yeah, it's kind of a continuation of Denver. So, like I said, my grandmother was sick with cancer, and I got back to Chicago, and she passed away after 6 months of that diagnosis. And my grandfather was here, and so I would travel from Chicago to Logansport, which is a 2 or 3 hour trip, to spend time with him. And he ended up getting sick as well. And this is actually how I got connected with City Yoga. He was, it was the first location, and he was in the hospital there. I forget what the name of that hospital was, but I would spend days and nights there. And City Yoga was just a walk away.
Oh.
And so I would see workshops with master teachers, David Swanson and Rolf Gates. And Rolf, his book, Meditations on the Mat, was my very first yoga book that I ever got at Core Power Yoga. I thought it was just a cool cover. And all of a sudden I'm, at the hospital and looking at this class schedule, and I'm seeing this author that I've read his book, or, had his book and read in my classes, is right across the street teaching a weekend workshop. So I thought City Yoga became my sort of refuge from that, of, being at the hospital for 12, 14 hours and then come and take it overnight and then go take a yoga workshop all day. And, when the content is new, and it always is new, it seems like, you don't need sleep, because it's just so engaging. And Rolf is such an amazing teacher. And so anyways, the experience with my grandfather, he actually didn't make it out of that hospital. He had a surgery and was there for a couple of months and passed in the hospital. And throughout the journey of seeing both of them in this medical environment, and I hadn't really done a lot of studying yet outside of yoga, I was just getting into, maybe I should eat better. And I didn't know, I didn't grow up, but to me, like, pizza and hamburger helper were kind of the thing, as I was growing up. And so I didn't know anything. And I saw what was happening in the hospital and with both of them, and realizing that there was a huge disconnect between health and healing, and what they needed and what they were receiving. Mm-hmm. And it was very one-sided, and I started to want to know more. I knew that I didn't want to, I felt very helpless. I knew just enough to be dangerous with my grandfather. Yeah. And so he had lung cancer. Mm-hmm. And so I had found that if I would just place my fingertips right between his eyebrows or his forehead and just tell him to relax and take some deep breaths, it was amazing, because we could see a difference in the numbers that were showing. Yeah. And that was really profound. And so I decided I wanted to know more. I didn't want to feel helpless anymore. So I started researching, well, what does homeopathic medicine look like? What does naturopathic medicine? And started figuring out where I wanted to go. And what I settled on that would be most effective and I could learn in the least amount of time was nutrition. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing them trying to heal, and they're getting fed red Jell-O. And, it was okay, this doesn't make sense here at all.
Red, so, yeah. Oh my God.
And I was at the point where I was kind of going into health food stores and going I don't know what to do with this. It's completely unfamiliar to me. And so I enrolled for the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, which is an online program that was being run out of New York City. And again, it just blew my mind. learning all of the different dietary theories and how each of us are individual and each one has a different need. And it's really in our best interest of our health to explore that and figure out what is best for us. And their program was just amazing in teaching you that about yourself and then training you to work with others. And so when my grandfather passed away, my dad had this building that he had bought that he was going to use for storage next to his business. Uh-huh. And I went into that building, and it was an old tire shop, and it was just, it was a mess. And I popped up one of the drop ceilings, and it had a beautiful 10 ceiling in it, and the upstairs had great wood floors, and I just thought this could be a really amazing space. And I spun around in that building for a year and a half, and started teaching in there, just one-on-one. Mm-hmm. I had decided to move back in the interim of going to India, and created a vision board. You mentioned your vision board earlier. Created a vision board, and when you create a vision board, you be ready, because eventually, like it's a very powerful process that comes through. And so
careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly. This grant came up in the town that wanted to convert properties to mixed-use developments. Mm-hmm. So commercial on the first floor, residential on the second floor. And that was my dad's intention, was that he wanted to put an apartment up there so he didn't have to drive. He lives, 30 minutes. If he didn't want to have to drive, he could just stay next door. So it worked out. We got a little help, and we, rolled up our sleeves and started working on this building and rehabbed the building. And that's how it started.
I'm going to have to organize a field trip with some of our teachers and students to come up, check out your space. That sounds like what a great journey. And and I really don't know too much about Logansport other than I had a business opportunity, probably in the 90s to go up and live up there and run these little, it's basically a fast food franchise that an uncle was involved in. And he's like, hey, I'll give you partial ownership in this store in Logansport and another one in Peru. And you can move up there. And I had, a family with young children. I went up there and kind of checked it out. And I was I had gone through what you had with Urban Outfitters earlier, where I was working with a big company, moving around a lot. And I was just there's my values were shifting. I was putting all this effort into driving bottom line profits for a big company. And I was just there's just some internal conflicts, I guess, about what my life's purpose is, and my living my dharma and trying to find that. So anyway, fast forward, my youngest daughter went up to Culver, which for our listeners, it's a boarding school that's about 40 miles from Logansport. And I was always intrigued, and on their campus, they have this Logansport gate. Have you heard about the Logansport gate?
I have not, actually.
Oh, it's like a fun little story about, you talked earlier about how yoga helps train us to be like a good human being, and how that shift happens so I'm always drawn to these stories of, people doing, these phenomenal things. And it's a story. So it's this nice wrought iron gate. It's like a Logansport gate. given to the cadets at the Culver Academy in like 1913 for coming to our rescue during this giant flood. And as the story goes, they had this big flood, and I guess there's a couple rivers in Logansport, and it was, the mayor had called the kind of like the headmaster at the school, because he knew they were on Lake Maxinkuckee and they had some boats because they trained, rowing, and the Navy loaned them some pretty decent sized ships to train the cadets on. So anyway, they're like, we're getting just pummeled by this flood. Can you help us? And the headmaster's like, yeah, we'll come. So he got about 60 of the boys up. These high school kids. They had to take these little cutters, which are like a 28-foot by 8-foot wide boat that weighs like 1.5 tons. They'd carry them half a mile load them on a flatbed train, go to Logansport, and then they had 4 of these boats, and they were able to, because they were all trained at, navigating and dealing with floodwaters. And they rescued like 1,100 people that night or the following day. And so in gratitude, the mayor and the town gave them that gate. So I always think about that, like this, really it was a heroic effort of these young boys, and they had some adult leadership, but it was like, it was a snowy springtime, they had to trudge through the snow and deal with this at night, carrying these boats onto it. I just can't imagine getting our high school kids today to do something like that. But it was like they were just doing what needed to be done. And I think that's an essence of what like yoga kind of teaches us about being a good human being, and the woman and that Brahmana's garden, like how did that school happen? She followed her heart. Just it sounds like she just showed up and did what needed to be done, and it blossomed. And it kind of sounds like that's your journey as well. Like, hey, I'm going to open a space where I can share this practice, and now you're living it. And I'm real intrigued by your interest in like nutrition, and I'm curious how. I think when we talked before, you may be finished by now, but I know you were at Prana Yoga going through some advanced training with the focus was on Ayurveda, or is that actually with Danny McGuire over in Fort Wayne?
Yeah. What's
going on? How's that been for you?
Yeah, it was really good. I laugh. I always tell Danny I probably took the longest ever to complete 300-hour training. And it's probably the same for the yoga therapy program. I tend to space my learning out at this point along, but it's been lovely.
Yeah.
It's been lovely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I related to your story because I'm just like a lifetime learner, right? I love seeking knowledge about things I'm interested in, and yoga and its various little branches. And much like you, I did a 200-hour, and then I want to learn more. I did another 200-hour, and then I did a 300-hour, and now I'm doing like a refresh, kind of another 300 with Rolf, just because. We met about 10 years ago and kind of became friends. And so I just like hanging out with him and learning from him, because he is really such a gifted teacher. And in the meantime, I'm just have always sought out to learn from different teachers from different parts of the world and different. And what I was excited about having you on the show is because, listening to your story, and I was like, there's some amazing people like yourself in Indiana. Like, who would have thought, this little rural kind of Indiana state has, all these pockets of enthusiasm around yoga that are starting to blossom, and they have, and I think what a gift that is for our communities, far and wide, big and small. So I just wanted to really put a shout out to you for that work that you're doing, and and raising kids, and life is still coming at you. It sounds like. When you, who were some of your influential teachers? You mentioned Dave in Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and then who else has come on your radar?
Yeah, I just I've loved over the years just finding diversity and learning, and I talk a lot to our students about lineage and understanding where the teachings are coming from, and how we develop our language by listening to our teachers. And one of my favorite things to do back when Yoga Journal still held their conferences was just to go to those conferences and study with all of the master teachers,
I remember those days. Yeah.
Estes Park, it's like the best just to go and take class with David and Sharon Gannon and Sean Korn and Shiva Ray and Gary Krafskow.
Yeah.
From Vinny Yoga. I love taking class with him. I love taking class with Nikki and Rolf.
Yeah.
Just there's so much to learn, and we have just such amazing access to so many amazing teachers. The well is so deep, and I get so excited about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Dwaba, because you mentioned, you had an opportunity to come to Logansport, and I was like, oh, I will never live in Indiana. And if I live in Indiana, I'll only live in Bloomington. Those were my set for myself. But there was always this knowing of the need, of where the need was. So a lot of times I say I feel like a fish out of water, and that's what I expressed to Dwaba. Sometimes I feel like I'm on an island because I want to be able to just be a student and learn. And I don't always find that. And she said, well, have you ever thought about moving? And I think about that a lot, but the reality is it's really needed. The yoga and the work in the local food is so needed in these areas. And that was the goal, was to have the ripple effect. And initially the mission was to open studios in Logansport and Kokomo and Lafayette. And then in those smaller rural areas, I thought what Bodyworks was going to be was that. And we did have a studio in Monticello for a few years.
Okay.
And as I got further along in the journey, I realized that's not actually what I wanted to do, was to have multiple studios, but I wanted to train people to go and do that on their own. So Monticello went into the hands of the Monticello community, and our last training that we did, someone opened a studio in Winamac, Indiana.
Nice.
So people are going out and they're teaching yoga in these small little communities, and our thing is the ripple effect, and just really building this network and building this practice into the fabric of these smaller communities that really need it.
Mm-hmm.
And then more than ever needing to build to detach our need to rely on industrial food system, and, just expressing the importance of growing our food and supporting local farmers. And, and building that system, that infrastructure that creates food security for us.
Yeah.
So
how are you going about the working in the local food? I mean, you mentioned that you're a local food catalyst, and so what's that work look like?
Well, that term comes from my teachers in the local food industry, Lynette and Michael Brownlee, and they live in Boulder, and they've been at this for so many years. And Michael wrote the book, The Local Food Revolution. I think I told you about that book before. Yeah. It's amazing. And so, I've learned so much for them. And what I really love about them is two things. One is a catalyst creates a center of aliveness. So it's very much what you're doing. It's what a yoga teacher is doing in their class. It's, creating a space for something to grow. And so this local food catalyst, the idea is that there is a language, there's a pattern of emergence of everything. It's like the laws of the universe, that things emerge through 7 stages. And they studied so much, but one of the things that it's an architect. His first name is Christopher. I'll have to think of what the last one, but he wrote these volumes on architecture and how buildings emerge, sacred buildings emerge through this pattern. And then Michael and Lynette have taken it, and it parallels with the emergence of the principles of the universe, and then brought it into how a local food system emerges. Ooh. And so there's a structure to it, but based on like our current system, the way that our current food system is, it's very difficult to succeed. No one's really past stage 5 or 6 at this point. Even like, Vermont is the leader in this for 20 years, and they're only at 5% of local food production. Yeah. So, our work is just so vast. And so sometimes I get discouraged by that, but basically what we've been doing is just finding farmers who are growing food for a living. And that's what they want to do. And most of them have a real job, right, and then they're farmers. So they work so hard, and, they can't sustain themselves off of farming. And so we try and work with those people, and we have CSA programs and connect farmers directly to consumers. And so my vision, the bigger vision, we have a raised bed gardens, is to have a local food farm store. And, we have small versions of that, but to have a local food co-op farm store, urban gardens, greenhouses, in the downtown area, and then be able to connect that into some of the other work that we do with recovery and this other great program called the Insight Garden program that's happening in Logansport too. So,
Insight Garden program. All right.
Insight Garden program. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
This program is it's mindfulness and meditation teachings steeped in permaculture principles. Ooh. And it's in the Logansport juvenile facility. Mm-hmm. It's in the boys facility, and then it was in LaPorte girls facility. I think they've put a pause on that. And then it's in California. It started in San Quentin. So they have in California, they have some reentry programs in New York City, and then they have juvenile programs in Logansport. And it's so random. And I found out that they were doing this. It came out of Berkeley, and the programming is so robust. It's so beautiful. And what the kids are learning, the boys are learning, is permaculture principles. It's how to be in a system, a community, and how every single aspect of the community is important. Every single aspect of the community contributes to the whole, and therefore there needs to be integrity in that. And they learn it by watching plants grow and meditating. It's like, and what these kids are experiencing, and firsthand just seeing the benefits and looking forward, that's what they look forward to, is a moment where they actually find peace. It's powerful.
So sweet. It reminds me of, there's a guy that I've known for a long time, and he actually went through our teacher training program, and he started this program called Indianapolis yoga and basketball and gardening.
Oh, JP Raleigh. Right?
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to meet him, and he's teaching meditation at City Yoga.
Yeah,
right?
He's teaching meditation, and he was on the podcast. You have to check it out. It's on our archives there. And but basically, he was going into urban youth, and got some space at a local park, put in some raised bed gardens, started a nonprofit. And so he would basically work with these kids with gardening and yoga and meditation. And sort of that reminded me of what you were talking about in the juvenile facility, where teaching kids to calm the mind, quiet, find stillness. And you could relate to them on the level of playing basketball and like, hey, this stuff works. And anyway, he's a neat guy, and he has latched on to meditation in a big way. So it's cool to watch him grow and evolve. I mean, I probably, actually he like worked for me when he was in high school, when I was working for Starbucks, running some stores. And it's like, now, years later, he's grown into this, this man of integrity and community, and that's super cool. But so back to the food thing, it's really intriguing, because as we've talked before, I've got this, farm sort of project in Illinois that, I've been focusing on permaculture and restoration, and it's talking about local food, because it's situated really it's almost halfway between Chicago and Indianapolis. So two pretty large markets within 2.5 hours of the farm. So there's I know there's a market for healthy food, local food. And, it just, and I'm trying to study a lot about what's going on with soil and trends in farming and climate change and permaculture and farm to table and local food initiatives out there. And it's really, it's been eye-opening the last few years to kind of start to understand the system we're in, and industrial food, and then the health effects of, consuming massive amounts of processed food and, corn syrup and whatever, all these things that we just infuse our food supply with. And so I'm, optimistically looking forward to that people will support these things and evolve. And listening to your story in Logansport, it's clear communities are embracing this shift. And I think, a lot of us, we don't know what we don't know. And, like I grew up with the, hamburger helper and pizza and, fast food and all that but when I started to become a little more conscious And interestingly, I worked in the food industry for a long time, from, the more upscale restaurants to casual dining and all across the gamut. And I really started looking at nutrition for myself even before finding yoga. I had a strong meditation practice, and it was in 12-step recovery since my early 20s. So I had this awareness that, what we put into our body matters. And so anyway, we'll definitely have to connect. And I want to learn more about what you've got going on up there. And we'll get a little field trip going up there and check things out. So as we, you talked a lot about mindful living and like this spirituality that kind of yoga has, allowed to grow within you. Where are you going from here as far as, you went, I love the transition from multiple studios to, well, let's do one and create the ripple effect. So are you in that space, that original space in Logansport still? And
we are. Yeah, I have been thinking about applying for the USDA grant again this year, the local food promotion grant. Applying for a grant takes a lot of time and energy, so I hesitated that. But there's a consideration to doing that, and if anything, it would be spending some time reworking sort of the business plan around it, and getting clear about what the vision looks like outside of a vision page. You have to bring it from up here to bring it down into the real world, and so
the practical aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also have this desire to get solar panels on the studio as well. That feels like a good thing to do. We have infrared heaters in there, and sometimes I have a conflict with heating a room, to do that. And so it feels like a good, responsible, and also like a cool thing to get through that hoop and say, okay, like we've got solar happening here, and to be a good example for that. So those are some of the things that are on my mind.
Is there much solar in Logansport right now?
They're working on a solar field. The city is,
okay.
But not any on businesses or residential currently. I have a friend who has had solar panels for years, and so they help me, and I have a great person that I'm working with who's owns a solar company that it's doable for sure.
Yeah. That's so cool. And I think I shared with you that over in Illinois, we've got a solar project going on in one of the buildings. It's more of a public space that houses a kind of collection of antique farm implements, and it's a sort of a museum. I use that term kind of loosely. Started by one of my relatives who's since passed away, but we're having solar put on that roof. So that building, we're looking towards, kind of zero carbon for that footprint. And it's something, the community is wanting to hang on to that as an asset. Of course, it's a good community gathering space, and we want to do some educational stuff around, kind of local farming and, growing healthy food and, harmony with the land, which it seems to me most farmers I've met, and I've had a few in the family, that they have a reverence for the land, even amongst the commercial farming that a lot of them have been used to doing for 30 years. They still had a sense they were doing what was best, and then they started, like if somebody comes along and says, hey, well, here's a new way of doing things that's even better for the land and for your own business model. There's a shift in the farming business model, and because a lot of them are, I don't know, I'm learning a lot and hearing a lot of frustration out there, and also it seems to be a growing awareness that, like, maybe what we're doing is not the best way. So I feel the shift in the air. Do you feel something like that?
Yeah, definitely. There's an organization I told you about before called Farmers Footprint.
Oh, yeah.
And they're creating some really great work and resources. One is just, I forget what the name of their newer film is, but you can do movie viewings, film viewings of that. And last year we did a showing of the movie Sustainable.
Yeah. Talking about that. Yeah.
We have an old historic theater in Logansport, so we did a showing. We partnered with Black Dog Coffee and a local food truck, a few businesses, and hosted this screening of Sustainable, and invited as many farmers, local food farmers, and then commercial farmers as we could. And we had in the entryway, we had the local farms there with their products and things, and then we did the movie viewing, and it was really great. And so Farmers Footprint provides those sort of resources. They also they're doing something right now called non-toxic neighborhoods, providing resources for people to begin to look at the toxins that we just have in our environmental toxins, which Logansport's fighting a big battle there right now with some businesses that are looking at coming in. So I see the resources coming up and the changes happening in that area, and it's exciting. And
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I love it. Well, wow, you have an amazing amount of things going on. And I love that enthusiasm and like that energy you're being able to share out there in the world. So what do you have going on? I mean, as we kind of wind down here a little bit, as far as event. I mean, we're all adapting to this Zoom world of remote yoga. What kind of trainings and things do you have coming up you may want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, we're trying to figure out the garden, first of all.
Okay, yeah.
That's the big thing, is like, what are we going to grow? How far are we going to go? Who's going to, how do you garden and social distancing, like, like that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's time. And then we started a transition online in January to online classes. And
yeah,
we've been streaming our classes for years, but not a lot of people used it. And our former company went out of business in January. And so we were like, do we let it go and just focus on in studio, or do we rebuild it in another way? And I took on the task of rebuilding it, and here we are. We need it, so we got through some of that before, because I was in Costa Rica when I closed the studio. I made the decision to close the studio. I was out of the country.
Oh, wow.
And so when I got back that week, we were luckily pretty much ready to go. So that was like such a gift. And
nice.
So our teacher training, our 200 hours online right now. And then I've reconnected with Rolf. So our very first teacher training at Bodyworks, I did an affiliate 200 hour with Rolf Gates yoga. And so he kind of mentored me and guided me through that first round just with 5 students. And then after that, I jumped in head first on my own. And so Rolf has just been a teacher, mentor for all of my yoga career. And we have enough people who have graduated at this point from 200 hour that it's time to think about 300 hour in our area. And so we've reconnected with Rolf for him to, again, kind of mentor me through this process of that next advanced yoga training, which, as you know, it's a huge endeavor to take on that. And it's exciting. So we're hoping in the fall to start that program.
We'll keep an eye on that and keep some good word posted for you out here.
Yeah. Thank you for, it was great for our community to practice with your community online this week. And so lovely for me to be able to come in and share time with you guys. And you've just been so welcoming and great with that. I really, really appreciate you and what you're doing.
Well, thank you. We're all in this together.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time out to, share your journey and the wonderful things you have going on.
Thank you.
And, I think that's all we have. Any parting words you'd like to add?
Oh, parting words. It's what I'm feeling right now is just gratitude, gratitude for connection and for these teachings that we all share and are such a gift to receive. And my heart goes out to the world right now. And this situation that we're in is,
oh my God,
it's crazy. And we're all in it together. And I hope that this dissolves some of the boundaries that we've had, and we come out humans that are just more solid, more peaceful, and more grounded and simple, and all that. So,
well, that's my hope as well, that we find, the message of gratitude, and that we find this coming together. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and namaste.
Namaste.
Wow, what an awesome conversation we got to have, and what a beautiful human being. I feel so really blessed to be the host of this podcast that gets to talk to so many amazing people out there in the world doing their good works and sharing this passion and wisdom of yoga. So, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. On the podcast notes, I'll include some of the books that Natasha referenced, some of the programs that she's been involved in her local community, the children's home or school in India where she had visited with and it sounds like an amazing teacher, human being. So I'll have that information in the notes that you can check it out as well. And please help support our little podcast by sharing it with your friends and family. Encourage them to give it a listen, give it a try, peruse through the archives of just, we have a very diverse a range of people with life experience and yoga journeys and teachings from all around the world. If you'd like to send some suggestions on future interviews or people you'd like us to chat with, you can email us at theyogavoicepodcast@gmail.com. So theyogavoicepodcast@gmail.com. And again, thank you so much for subscribing. Leave us a review if you'd like. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you for listening to The Yoga Voice, brought to you by City Yoga, School of Yoga and Health, where we are committed to exploring how yoga inspires and transforms. Find out more at www.cityyoga.biz. That's CITYOGA.biz. Special thanks to our producer, Brian Sims, for his audio expertise.